Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm gentlemen. Great to see everybody here this morning. Welcome to the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting, specifically to review the draft annual report. I'd like to open with karakia. Tūtau mai I runga, tūtau mai I raro, tūtau mai I waho, tūtau mai I roto. Kia tau ao te mai tū, te mari ora ki ke takoa. Tume, haue, takie. Which is, I summon from above, below, outside and within, to calm and settle the vita in essence. The well-being of everyone be joined together, So, apologies. Nicole is going to be late.
Yeah,
is that right?
Just like you here when I was here.
Comes in. And Alistair has mentioned that you'll be leaving partway through.
Yeah, about how much to eat.
Yeah, great. That's fine. All right, thank you. We need to
I'll move those.
thank you. And a second by
Yes.
Sean, thank you. Just a reminder, if there is anything in terms of declarations of interest that you see today that you need to remove yourself from, then just please let us know as that item comes up. There's been no notifications of anyone to speak from the public. And looking at our minutes of the last meeting, which was just a month ago.
Yeah, I'll move those, Jim.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Morris, thank you. In favour? Against? Passed. No notification of extraordinary items. And no questions have been submitted yet either. Chair and councillor reports. So really, just reflecting on today, we're here to review the annual report. Really, it's the accumulation of the entire year's work, isn't it? In terms of both financial and performance. The most important thing about it is that as governors, we've been monitoring this for the entire year, and so there really shouldn't be too many surprises in there. It's just how we sort of package it together and present it. So I hope that sort of is the case, that in our role, we've understood what's been happening in the organisation for the entire year, both financially and performance-wise. So again, looking forward to reviewing it and the discussion that will occur. Any of the councillors have anything to report on? Oh, that's fine. We'll just move on and get into it. Right, so I'm just going to move to the correct page number. (9.1). So the reason we're here today is to review the draft annual report and its summary. So I'm going to ask to come forward people who have put a lot of time and effort into this. Rachel, good to see you. You want to come down, Tanya, or you going to? So I'm just going to start by doing a big thanks, because I know it's a huge effort to put this together. In terms of the annual report, both the financials and the performance measures. So yeah, thanks for all your time and effort doing this. I'll let you open up with the terms of just Chloe, to start with how we should best go through it, because I think we have had a bit of a discussion on that, but it's good for everyone to hear in terms of the format to take us through it.
As has been already said, this is our opportunity to reflect back on the year that's been and have a look at our performance and financial results. We're doing a tag team this morning with Dave leading out on the performance results and Tanya on the financial. I was going to sort of talk about things at a high level first, and what we were proposing to do is to work through section by section. In the past we have sometimes done it page by page, but we'll focus on key sections and take you through the report that way if that is acceptable to the committee.
That seems like a good process.
If we have questions on our section by section, shall we do that rather than at the end?
I agree. Yes, absolutely. Let's do that. If that sounds right to you, Rachel.
That sounds great.
Great. do that.
Now, I'm aware the chair hasn't arrived in the building yet, but the part, I guess, that is the high-level summary of the document is the message from the chairman and the chief executive, which you can see on pages 18 and 19 of your agenda. So this is signalling, I guess, some of the key achievements for the year and key focuses. And in particular, you can see reference to the Southland Water and Land Plan, which became largely operative in May and was a significant milestone for the organisation. Freshwater is a priority, as you can see throughout the whole document. And so this discussion about some of the land sustainability requests that we get and the focus on riparian planting and wintering. Another focus area is obviously biosecurity and biodiversity. Our work with Emergency Management Southland, and then the work that we've been doing both in the climate change and climate resilience space. So the work on the regional climate change strategy with Te Marama and the other Southland councils, alongside the climate resilience projects that have been ongoing over the last year. We touch on our work in the air quality space. There's a bit of a specific focus on DERIA, and then that leads into a summary of our financial results, which, as you will be aware, the year finished with an operating result in line with budget, and Tony will talk a bit more about this, obviously, and that is despite some of the unexpected and unbudgeted costs that we experienced during the year, such as the September 2023 flood event and emergency openings of both the Waitunga Lagoon and Waiau River mouth at Blue Cliffs. So we were successful, obviously, with that latter event. We were removing a former landfill and getting some central government funding, and we also reprioritised our expenditure to cover costs. So that's a very high-level summary at the front and the message from the chair and chief executive, and this is the first section. So if there's any comments, feedback on that section, yeah, we could take those now.
Boris.
Oh, thank you. I think you should say attempted Waiau River mouth opening because it wasn't successful, or something like that, just to make that clear. The other thing is I know if people read through it, they'll understand it, but the sentence is two down from there, we reported a surplus of 8.85 million. People say, well, why do we need a rates rise then if that's the case? So I think that could possibly be explained a little more. I know you talk about unrealised gains there. Readers will, probably may not know what that means. I'm not sure. I'm just saying that that might need to be clarified a little bit more.
Sure. I think, still on the financials, I think we are going to probably touch on, we will dive into financials soon. So let's highlight that and then once we talk about financials, maybe we can circle back to this sentence here. So let's not forget it.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions on section 1? Yes, Lyndall.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Not a question really. Just a congratulations on putting those words together. They're pretty well expressing, what we're trying to say. And I particularly appreciated maybe we haven't got to that, the opportunities for Māori to contribute to decision-making section. I think that's because I was going to suggest we moved the last paragraph on page 2, further up the food chain of that page, but actually, given that there's a lot of commentary that follows, it's probably not necessary actually. Thanks, Chairman. Yeah.
Anything else on section 1? Right, Rachel.
Thank you. So the next section is our region and people, which is just some information about the region and our council and mana whenua reps. And that then takes us through into opportunities for Māori to contribute to decision making, which is pages 22 and 23. So that's 2 sections I've just skimmed across very quickly, but was there any feedback, questions on those 2 sections?
Ross.
Well, I thought it was very good actually. I like Lyndall with the last her comments just before. Explains it very clearly. you know, what we do, how we do it, and that, so I thought it was good.
Okay, so that then moves us into the performance reporting section, which Dave is going to lead out on today.
Thanks, Rach. Through you, Chair. I think one of the key things is to support you to understand the differences between what came to finance and performance with the quarterly final quarter, the LTC update report in September, due to, as we discussed at the time, change from not using the partially achieved category. Overall, 34 out of 54 performance measures were achieved over the last year. As has been discussed many times, some of those were due to the way that those targets have been designed, and so there's been quite a consistent not achieved for some particular targets. I think the key thing there is that we have done a huge amount of work in those spaces, and we have just missed by a small amount, particularly where we have targets which are 100%. So it's amazing work by all the team, and just having missed it through some target design. Key area there is that we have addressed those through into the current long-term plan, 2024 to 34. There also have been some other changes or things that have happened throughout the year that have influenced the level of achievement, including legislative changes or indications from the government, which mean that it hasn't been, or the decision has been made to not follow on the same trajectory. Didn't make entire sense in terms of efficiencies, and so particularly proposed plan change timeframes and resourcing being directed to other priority projects, and some work taking longer than anticipated, and that has then had a flow-on effect to other projects. As we know, some things don't run to plan. In terms of the sections, you can see on page 28 an overview of the graph overview of by portfolio of what we have achieved and what we have not achieved. In comparison to previous results over the last 2 years, very consistent with last year's result and slightly down on that of 2021 to 22. We know that when we're setting targets for the first year of an LTP, we have a little bit more, we have more certainty, and the further out you get, the less certainty you have around achieving things, and you've got more time for things that are outside of our control to come into play. Any questions on the overall overview?
Yes, we've got a few. So Jeremy is first.
Just in regards to the, I think we talk about this every year about having 100% achievement. I mean, we're always doomed to fail. Like the reality is the world's not a perfect place, so we can't. I mean, great to have aspirational levels, but I struggle when 80% would be probably a pretty good target. But when we're sitting at 100% and we get to 95, but we failed, you know, we haven't achieved, doesn't make sense. And I mean, I don't know whether we can. Is that the target we set, or is it government? So we're actually being hard on ourselves then. And I think I've asked this every year, and I'm going, why are we keep on doing this? Because it's actually really good getting 95%, but that goes not achieved. So I think we're being far too hard. I don't know if we can we look at in the future to be a bit more realistic and sort of reward, give yourselves a pat on the back rather than saying, sorry guys, you're 100, you're out. You know, it's just not realistic.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor McPhail. Yes, that is something that we are very aware of, and this is the final year of the current long-term, or the 2021 to 31 long-term plan for which these targets apply. So for annual report 2023-2024, we will be utilising the new targets that have been adopted through the long-term plan, 2024 to 34 long-term plan. We took a hard and long look at the targets that we developed, and with that in mind, that we wanted to be successful as opposed to setting unachievable essentially unachievable targets. So yeah, that's a continual thing that we're looking at.
John?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess this report highlights the pig in the middle spot that we get between the community of Southland and central government. And I guess our message has to be very clear that we are on a trajectory of freshwater improvement. Constant improvement is our game. Is there another metric we could put in here that, I guess, to Jeremy's point, highlights how we're achieving regionally versus the national policy statements or whatever other metric we need to look at, just to show that the region we are constantly improving, and we do need to find ways of walking that tightrope from central government of the day, just so that we do end up the right outcomes for Southland in our long term.
Through you, Chair. Thanks for that, Councillor Pemberton. Yeah, it's an ongoing aspect that we need to balance in terms of reporting on our activities and the targets that we set. Sometimes it comes down to what the indicators or what the sources of data and information that we have are. We do need to still be responding to the national policy direction and showing that we are achieving and doing our job in that respect. But you definitely take on that feedback. Be something to look at, yes, for us in an ongoing and iterative way to reflect on that with the current LT long-term plan targets, and just identify how that looks with a regional lens, but that is something that we strive to do. Yes, thank you.
Alistair?
Through you, Chair. I guess when we go back to the introduction and look at the emphasis that's gone on to water quality and things, can you explain to me why the water and land debt numbers achieved pretty low? Are the rest of them pretty close, or?
So through you, Chair, I think it comes back to the changing direction essentially. So with our targets that we set way back in 2020/21, we had a reasonably clear idea at that point of where we thought freshwater policy, for example, was going, and there's been successive changes. So you can see that our direction has changed over that time, and so some of the targets are less relevant than they were at the time. So the first not achieved is around implementation of the national policy statement for freshwater 2020 via notification of the plan change, and you'll be familiar with the conversations in the space about that particular plan change and the fact that now the government is changing the direction and we're looking to notify the plan change by 2027 or sooner if practical. So that's been a shift in response to national direction.
Good. I'll just ask a question to follow up on that. So in terms of the performance measures, setting the LTP for all 3 years, is there a way or possibility of setting them annually instead of setting them now for 3 years' time?
So through you, Chair, we did look at this, and I know other councils will change them periodically through the annual plan processes. That hasn't been something we've done to the state because that requires, not because of this reason, but it does require that you go out and public consult if you are changing your performance framework. So it's certainly an option, not one that we've followed to date, but yeah, something we could do.
Boris?
Oh, thanks, Michelle. I'm not sure if I'll go too far past where we're at, but on page 26, you've got a little bar or box to the side. So an infographic will replace it. So what would that be?
Oh yeah, so through you, Chair, thanks for that, Morris. So what we utilise for that infographic is we just make it, instead of words, a lot more user-friendly in terms of people being able to access that information. The reason why the infographic has come is because we utilise the design element on the summary, the annual report summary, and for the process, it's a lot more efficient for us to have the finalised versions before sending away for design.
I like the way that you got last year's and this year's achievements sort of side by side or one after the other, so you can, you can see what we did last year or achieved or not achieved in this year as well. On page 30, you've got information there about the security biodiversity monitoring program. There's a comment about possum control areas. I know that this is an ongoing bit of an issue, and that we're sort of losing the war against possums, as I understand at the moment. It would be good to have some data in there about the areas where we're achieving that 5% goal we want to have to keep possums at a low level, and areas where we're not achieving that. Would that be possible, or would that be useful?
We'll just jump to the section now for this question, and then we can come back to the.
Yeah, through you, Chair, it's definitely something that we can look at and explore in terms of the value add for community. Yes.
I think people, Mr. Chairman, useful people to know that, this is a bit of an issue that is growing and that we will need to put more resources into in the future. People see the number of dead possums on the road, a lot more than what they used to be, and so that's a growing issue that we could highlight here. But
yeah, that's a fair statement. The more transparent we can be, the better. I'll just check in terms of after comments on. We were sitting about page 28, weren't we? And sort of doing some high level comments. Would you like to move on to the next section now? Does anyone else have any overarching questions on page 28 before we dive into the next section?
I was going to respond to that. Just in terms of balancing, how much detail do you try and cram into this?
yeah,
There's because if people have an interest, I'm sure there's other places they can look to within our website and our reporting framework to understand specifics and drill down. So I would just urge a little bit of caution about how much we try to add or squeeze into this report in that respect. So because I think there's this balance between how much detail you provide and in terms of providing an overall snapshot of our annual performance. That would just be something I'd urge caution on.
Yeah, I can see how people would have different views on it, and really the staff have got that. I'm sure having to play with the amount of room that you have and time to put into this. So if you take the feedback. Thank you. And was there one?
Yeah, no, I'm fine actually, thank you.
Through you two, I'm going to hand over to Tanya to talk to the financials in regard to our activities overall.
So we're on page. Are you going to do the overall financials, Tanya, or just?
Yes, please, Chair. Page 93.
Okay. And are we going to come back to the other sections?
Oh, we were just looking at.
Sorry, the
Page 29.
or we can carry. Maybe it's more simple for Dave to continue and then come back.
Should we do all the performance measures first, and then we come to financials afterwards?
Good plan.
So equality.
Yes. Yes. So equality. Page 30.
Yep.
So in equality, we achieved 3 out of 4. We in the finance performance with the LTP quarterly report, one of the targets in the equality portfolio was put forward as a target not able to be measured. Following feedback from the auditor, that has changed to a not achieved, and that's target 4.1 on page 33. The reason for that was the timing of the scheme discontinuation, and because the 2023 to 24 performance target was the annual target number of households accessing the home heating scheme, despite us discontinuing the scheme, we still didn't achieve the measure.
Any questions on the air quality section?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, what page was that, Dave?
33 on that last.
Yes, page
comment.
33, target 4.1.
Page 34 draws out the highlights for equality for the year.
Can I
Mm,
just
yes,
ask,
Phil.
just on the very first paragraph explaining why it wasn't achieved, to me that didn't quite connect. It was determined there was limited staff resources to advance the report and review alternatives. Is that the report that looked at alternatives to the Clean Air Low scheme? Are we justifying why we didn't consider alternatives, or are we justifying why we closed down the scheme?
We are, through you, Chair, we are talking to why we didn't review alternatives and follow through with alternatives. Yeah. But it could be something that we actually look at to make clearer.
Any other questions on equality or that measure? Okay, thank you, Dave.
Awesome, thank you. On page 34, you get the snapshot of what will also be included in the annual report summary. Into water and land on page 36. So as the question alluded to by Councillor Gibson, one achieved out of the 6, and Rachel has provided an indication of why we did not achieve some of those targets. In terms of those that change from partially achieved in the quarterly update, 5.1 on page 38, that was not moved to not achieved due to a change in the plan change to Ōtahi timing. Measure 8.1, change from partially achieved to not achieved on page 41, due to work being done but having not fully completed that piece of work. So again, it comes into the measures that we get very close but not quite fully achieve them.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we've got 2-page numbers on our things. Which ones are you referring to?
Sorry, I'm referring to the overall agenda pages.
So 41.
Yeah.
So so the first one that got changed was 5.1. That's on.
Yes, page 38. Oh, sorry, 6.1. 6.1. My apologies.
6.1.
Yes.
6.1 and 8.1.
Yes.
Sorry, again, just on the explanation for that one, the second paragraph under explaining why that's not achieved, it says it's occurring through plan change to Ōtahi and catchment science summaries. I'm just wondering if, given the recent decisions on how to progress the water plan stuff, with a plan change to Ōtahi not being deferred, is there now a need to readjust the wording there at all, or does that still make sense to people? Or are we saying that won't occur until now 2027, potentially, when the limit setting plan change occurs?
So I can probably help with this one. Through you, Chair, the wording there is reflecting that there is a form of freshwater accounting operating, but it won't be fully giving effect to the current national policy statement until such time as the limit setting plan change becomes notified and takes effect. So it's another one that's tied to that decision around the plan change notification date. So there's definitely a form of freshwater accounting, but just not the prescribed form of the national policy statement.
Right. So is it quite clear, do you think, to the community that plan change to Ōtahi does now refer to that plan changes like occur or be as by 2027? I know our language has kind of shifted around how we're describing this, is I guess my concern in the last month or so. So just making sure people are clear which, with 2 plan changes looming in 2025, 2027, which one are we specifically referring to?
That's a good point.
Is it 6.1 and 8.1? Who have been updated? All right, so we'll look to move to the next section, water and land, page 42. Page 42.
Yeah,
Is that the next?
through you, Chair, the water and land highlight is at the end of the water and land.
Yes, sorry.
Section.
That's right. Biosecurity next.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, overall 7 targets achieved out of 11. One target was no longer applicable due to changes to MPSIG direction, and therefore, in previous years, there has been 12. In terms of changes from the quarterly report, on page 46, target 10.2. So this is a black or white target where it's all annual monitoring and work has been done, significant amount of work. However, this just wasn't fully completed and therefore the target was not achieved. This also is the target that Councillor Rodway referred to in terms of exploring whether we can put more detail in regard to those possum control areas. Page 48, and that's of the agenda, target 12.1. This is one of the targets that Councillor McPhail indicated earlier. That is a 100% target, and therefore is very hard for us to achieve. We achieved 97% of it, but not quite 100. Likewise, for target 14.3 on page 52, we achieved 95% of that target versus the 100% which was. So one of those ones which very close.
Right, thank you. Lyndall.
Yeah, just a quick comment actually on that very point. When I was reading through my agenda, I've scribbled hardly fair beside the 97% and the 95%. Sorry, that's all. It's not about being fair though, is it? No, of course not.
Forrest.
Regarding the biodiversity project grants, target 13.1 on page 49. Is it clear whether this is all tax money or whether there's some government money? I'm aware there was a government fund in this. So is there a proportion there, or does that need to be explained?
Through you, Chair, I might defer to Rach on this one.
Yes, so our Environmental Enhancement Fund was increased significantly as a result of the Jobs for Nature funding, and we certainly could note, I guess, some more detail about that in terms of how much is coming from government versus how much is being contributed by ratepayers.
It's probably in the financial detail somewhere, but might be.
We can draw that out.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to back up what Morris is saying, and I think it might help highlight when we do see a change in winds of central government around funding, and we've still got things like Wilding Pines that by no means dealt with. It might help bring the community along with where we need to focus some of our funding to make sure we are not wasting the past funding projects. So I think that's a very valid point. Thank you, Morris.
All right. I'll look at the next section, which is climate change and community.
Through you, Chair, I guess one thing I'd just like to note is when people are going through the annual report, the highlight pages are actually a really good space to indicate the significant amount of work that has been achieved in each of our portfolios. So just want to note that.
The forward snapshot. And so that's the page there. So on page
So,
53, for
oh,
example,
sorry,
that's-
so for example, biosecurity and biodiversity on page 53, yes.
So that's what's going to go into the summary,
Yes.
53 and 54. We're going to the summary.
On to climate change and community resilience.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I just
Okay.
comment on that? On page 53, the top of that little box is 11,178 native plants were planted. I think the important thing with native plants is to make sure that they are growing. And it's very difficult to establish native plants, and often you have a high mortality rate in the first year. So maybe, obviously that's a bit complicated here, but in the future, of 11,000 native plants that were planted in 2022, 10,000 of them are still alive next year. I think that's very important.
No, certainly understand your point in terms of with natives and the success rate of how many are left a few years later, so.
Well, it's not, if you look at, you don't get them growing, it's not successful what you're trying to do.
All right, so page 55, I believe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Out of the 9 targets, 6 were achieved. Again, noting that one measure had no target for 2023. Scrolling through. Target 19.1 due to having no target set for 2023-24 when we developed the long-term 2021 to 31 long-term plan initiative. In terms of changes from partially achieved to not achieved to a change to that target. Oh, sorry. Yes, page 56. We had a partially achieved move to an achieved, which is a positive, and that was due to looking at the 2023 to 24 performance target alone. In the Q4 report, we were assessing the previous year's targets as a whole. In terms of achieving, we achieved the 2023 to 24 target. On page 57 of the agenda, which is target 16.2, that changed to not achieved. Again, a very close measure to being achieved. It's all related to the adoption of the regional climate change strategy, which is essentially adopted now, subject to Environment Southland adopting it in the near future. That is also the same rationale and reason for the target on page 61, 18.2, moving to not achieve, because it directly relates to that strategy. Again, when you're looking 3 years out, we've missed the target by a couple of months. So yeah.
Mr. Chairman, on page 58, sorry, 42, 58 of the agenda, Bill had a comment on this as well. The comment there, it says data collection showed the average level of understanding of the community is 6.8 out of 10 people surveyed. To me, that doesn't say much. What the survey actually said was that Southlanders rate their understanding of climate change at 6.8 out of 10. It also said that 62% expressed concern about the impact of climate change on Maraeku Southland, and 54% thought council should intensify their efforts in addressing climate change related issues, and 66% were prepared to modify their own behaviours to mitigate the effects of climate change. I know that that is quite a mouthful and probably too much for this, but I do think the sentence where it says understanding of the community is 6.8 out of 10 people is very vague and difficult to understand. So I wonder if you could go back to the report of the survey and perhaps say something in a more condensed form than what I read out, but something that was reasonably positive. 54% thought council should intensify their efforts. 66% were prepared to modify their own behaviours. Something like that. That was a little easy to
Are you
understand.
reading from the survey report there?
That's a direct quote from the report, yes.
Okay. Do you want to also?
Yeah, can I just comment on that though?
Sure, yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. Don't entirely disagree, councillor, but the target and the measure are quite specific in that the measure is increased awareness of climate change and impacts on community and business. And the target is measuring community and business awareness. So in a way, what is already there speaks specifically to the awareness level of the community as far as there is a thing called climate change or there isn't in some people's views. That would be my only kind of explanation, and I might have that completely wrong, so the staff will correct me, I'm sure, but that's how I read it, that it's quite a specific measure and target about the awareness, and so that's why that particular sentence
Yeah,
only refers to awareness.
and certainly when I read that paragraph that comments on the result, would be good for the word awareness to be put into it at some point, because at the moment it talks about the community's understanding,
Yeah.
which is
So
which
that
is different to awareness and understanding. Which is, and then we can reflect on your wider
Well, no, the way
Input.
it's written now, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yep,
You can't have 6.8 out of 10 people for a start.
That's maths.
They rated their understanding as 6.8 out of 10.
yes, yeah, that's a good point, yeah, and we're measuring the awareness, is which, so,
If that's what we're measuring, that's a good point, councillor Ludlow, but I think it just needs to be a bit of clarity there.
all right, Dave, we'll ask you to have a look at that sentence.
Thank you.
So
Just on that point, when you know, it probably doesn't change here, anything here, but in regards to, I don't know how many people were in that survey, but it's such a small percentage of our community, and we're basing, we've got to base something, we've got to do something to base it, but it's actually, it's just one of those points that trying to get community involved in some of this stuff is so important, so we actually really get stronger data and more awareness. Phil, you'll have something, I can see your mouth already ready to pounce on me, but it is one of those things that we just need to really keep on trying to get more and more people in this discussion so we can make very better, clearer decisions.
Yes, those are the numbers, that's the result of those that was surveyed.
Yeah.
Was it the population?
I'm just going to observe, with 505 respondents across the region, you might argue there is some statistical significance that can be drawn from it. Maybe if you start to zero in that by settlement, with only one respondent from Balfour, for example, maybe that's not significant to draw conclusions about what Balfour's perceptions of climate change are. I'm not sure we actually asked a question that actually said, are you aware of climate change? Because people can be aware of it and still say, I don't buy into it, I'm aware there's this term out there. And so it's around what is the key overarching metric we want to extract from that survey that might speak to the fact we have completed a survey and there is some utility in that. One that I quite like to roll out is that there's 13% of those respondents said they don't believe in climate change and don't believe actions they would take would help. So that tells us we're tracking at about 13% of those surveyed who don't support climate action. So as an example, but no, I don't think that's the key metric that we want to put in as in the annual report. I think there's one or other two key metrics that might be more useful for that.
Yeah, just thanks, Chairman. In the broader sense of the conversation, just want to remind us that this is a retrospective piece of literature, and for us to keep all of these excellent suggestions for going forward for the next lot of planning, because we need to draw some of this through to our next lot of work. So yeah, just that it's retrospective, sadly, but that's the way reports are sometimes. Thank you.
Another point, Mr. Chairman, after that, thank you for that. The target 17.2.2, maintain operative hazard alerting system. And this is the antenna system. That's, I've got no argument with that really. I wonder if in the future we could have some kind of measure about the proportion of people in the community that do use that antenna system. I've only discovered it recently, I'm sorry to say, but it is very, very good. And if we had a high proportion of people who were using, had that on their phones and they get an alert every time there's a problem, or if they tells them when they put out their red bin or the yellow bin,
That's
and
right.
that sort of thing. But it tells you when there's flooding, what roads are flooded, like from the last flood event, it was really good. So I think as a measure in the future, it would be quite good to aim for a high proportion of the population using that system. That's not criticism of this now, but something to think about in the future.
Thank you, Maurice. All right. Move to the next.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, we are on to coastal marine. There were no changes to the Quarter 4 report. If anyone has any questions.
Nope.
Sorry, not a question. Well, it is kind of a question. Target 20.1. The revised regional coastal plan. I guess my question is for the future report. I hope that will be achieved within the next annual plan, let's say, because that's been not achieved for quite a long time, and I'd really like to see it finished.
Thank you. John.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Target 23.1, partnerships. This is an area I think actually it goes much wider than their coastal plan, and I think that's possibly a focus we need to look at as a council for moving forward in a whole lot of other things in our spectrum, and I do hope it's very much a focus of council.
It might be a little bit niggly, but we had referred the decision to the Minister of Conservation some time ago.
We've got it.
We've got it now, but we hadn't received it by then. So would be, we could say we'd referred to the Minister of Conservation by a certain date and hadn't yet received it, but that might be a little bit unnecessary.
Rachel.
And for you, we do definitely have the relevant documentation now, so that matter has been resolved.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman, just that, but that can't be included in this report because the timing of the report meant that it's, yeah.
All right. The highlights on page 74. Regional leadership.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Yes, regional leadership, 12 out of 16 targets achieved. Again, none were modified from partially achieved or changed from the Quarter 4 report. Just wanted to highlight, thank you, good point, Councillor Rodway, around how many people are using Anteno. Target 28.2 on page 81 of the agenda was about establishing a baseline for Anteno use. So we have established that baseline over the last year.
Thank you.
Lyndall?
Thank you. On page 82, measure 20, target 29.1. The approach for collecting information about the effectiveness of community engagement is currently on hold while it is being reassessed. I guess my question is, in what way is it being reassessed? Is that a budgetary thing? Is that a outcomes thing? What do you mean by being reassessed?
Through you, Chair, yes, there's a number of pieces of work that are underway that will inform how it is that we are engaging in, particularly in that partnership space. One of those is stakeholder and partnership strategy, which is in the current plan for the business plan for this year. So it enables us to we take a step back and review how it is that we want to be and what's going to increase our effectiveness in that partnership space.
Rachel?
Flowing on from the discussion, thank you, Chair, around Anteno, I just was going to highlight on page 89, which has got the summary of the regional leadership space, that one of the things that has been highlighted in that infographic that is to come is the 6 webcams that have been installed at key river sites, and there has been a lot of use of those webcams over recent days, so just wanting to draw your attention to that.
Yes, that's right. I apologise for not noting that before. I guess my sort of question about Anteno was that how well we are publicised. As I say, I might be a normal ratepayer or not, I'm not sure. I think I discovered it through the Southern District Council. I can't remember exactly why now, but we could push it a bit. And the other thing that is really good is that the cameras are on the Windy app. If you've got the Windy app, which is a really good weather app, you put your little square on somewhere on the map that's near a camera, like on Gore, for example, you can see what's happening in the Tower River at any time of the day and night. That's really good. So that may be another thing to promote.
Performance section finished, right? Yes. So we can move from performance now into finance, and Tanya is leading us through that component.
Thank you, Tanya. How would you like to go through this? Because again, the financial accounts are quite extensive in there. So, yes, what's your sort of proposed process?
I suggest, Chair, that I take us through the financial statements that the committee are used to seeing. That we look then at the notes and the prudential graphs at the end.
Okay.
That's
Do you
okay.
want questions, Tanya?
At each section, Councillor, I think.
So we'll split into about 3 or 4 sections.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to make reference to page 29, the one I was excitedly jumping into before. Page 29, Chair, is a consolidated funding impact statement for the council. So each of the sections that David, Michelle and Rachel have taken us through are represented by a funding impact statement, which says how much income have we received by way of rates and other income, and where did we spend it? It adds up. Rather than go through 6 of them, I'll just refer to page 29. In many ways, this tells a simpler story than the financial accounts do. If we look partway down the middle of this page, it says surplus deficit operating spending, 348,000 versus a budget of 175 negative. That reflects the general operating cash flows that come through the council, whereas the numbers below that are representative of grants, particularly that says sources of capital funding, grants and subsidies, 6.5 million versus a budget of 10, and then it goes on to talk about debt and investment. And that's perhaps where Councillor Rodway was suggesting is the difference in the public opinion on what is a surplus. The surplus of council is very small, very, very small here relative to the turnover. And very pleasingly, as we've noted in the item, it is very close to budget. Considering everything that actually went on during the year, it is a good result for council. What we can't control is the movement in the property, the value of the investment, and the grants from the government for climate resilience, which is this 6.5 million that we're talking about, is only available for those projects. It can't be spent on anything but those projects, and of course it was spent on those projects. So it is difficult trying to explain what a surplus is. It's an accounting term that's quite misleading to many. If you're happy with that, I'll jump to the.
No, I think it's some very pertinent points in terms of, I know most organisations do focus on that operating result, which is one of the main lines, and then sort of everything else below the lines, which have movements for other reasons. So it is, quite important that that is clear. Thank you for emphasising that.
Page 93 is, we used to call the profit and loss, now is called the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenditure.
93?
Page 93. A note, and councillors will be aware of this, on this page we have both the council results and the group. So the group for us is council and Southport, which is accounted into our financial results and our balance sheet. I will be focusing here on the council results, not the group. So Chair, we have notes throughout the page, notes 2 to 15, bringing through detail that anybody might wish to look at. I just want to emphasise again what we said in the item, that during the year, the finance performance meetings, we refer to a line called operating surplus or deficit. And we refer to that amount before funding from investments, because we're looking to talk about what council can control. So the budget for the year for the operating surplus and deficit was a deficit of 5.5 million. And again, we very pleasingly ended nearly exactly on that result of 5.5 deficit. Onto that deficit, we then add income from our bank deposits, our investment portfolio, and a very important contribution from Southport. That takes, again, Councillor Chairs, on top of that, we add investment income from the movement and the value in the portfolio, and then the capital grants from the government. But once we stack those together, we do reach this 8.85 million. As we mentioned before, the actual surplus and controllable amount of money that the council has from that is quite small.
So on that page 93, we're all looking at that. So the 5.5 that you mentioned.
Sorry, it's not within here. So the difference between the surplus reported to the finance and performance meeting is we tend to focus on that number. When we come to presenting public statements, due to the regulations, we can't show that number. Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to pull it out to say that that's where we landed, and ideally we could talk about that and show it separately. So thus, when we're looking at the number, it's hard for the public to see that. And that's why I was referring to the earlier page where you could see.
Certainly, page 93, the 8.8 million surplus is what jumps out there, as opposed to page 29. We go back to that. And quite clearly see just the operating surplus of
Once upon a time,
348,000.
yes, once upon a time we were able to bring down that extraordinary money to the bottom of the statement and call it extraordinary income, and show, for example, the capital grants, 6.5 million, would be able to stand out. But today we can't under the current standards, and so it all gets meshed. There's a technical word, meshed together. But we then have to go and dig into the body of it to try and make sense of that. So I'm just trying to bring that out for everybody.
No, that's fair. Yeah, let's ask any questions on that.
Yes,
Mr. Joyce?
So is that something we could say in that opening letter from Norma and Nicol, that the actual surplus was only 350,000, was it? It was 8.5 million.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Should we go back and just have a look at that opening paragraph again, just as we did say we would? So. Page 19.
Perhaps the committee could give opportunity for Rachel to edit that.
So you're right, so that, on back on page 19, is a sort of one sentence there talking about financials, which refers to that 8.8 million. Doesn't refer to the, say, 350,000.
And you have already noted for you, Chair, the desire to provide some further explanation around the 8.85 million, so we can bring some revised wording through to council in a couple of weeks' time.
If the committee's okay, we'll go into page 94. What was, again, the balance sheet is now the statement of financial position.
Does anyone else have any comments on that? Because it's probably the most pertinent point really around presenting that overall surplus, extraordinary or extraordinary.
Statement of financial position. Just draw councillors' attention to the property, plant and equipment line. It's
John, you do?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Just clarity,
Yes.
just clarity on when we'll see the change, sorry.
So from here, we go to council. So we've got a number of things you've highlighted that you would like to see some amendment to. So we bring a revised version through to that meeting on the 23rd of October.
So we're going to approve, we're going to say that we've reviewed it.
Yep.
And then recommend it to full council. And then you'll see it again at full council.
Yep.
And have a
Thank you.
on the 23rd.
so two items to draw your attention to on the balance sheet. Statement of financial position, page 94 of the proper document. Midway down, property, plant and equipment has note 10 against it. So we ended the year with $65 million of what we call PPE against a budget of 83 million. Now the reason for that is that, and I'm not sure if you recall, but during the annual plan for this particular year, we were expecting, maybe hoping, for tranche 2 of the Kanoa funding for climate resilience. And we had anticipated that that could be $10 million for this council. That was in fact the direction that was being indicated to us, but with change of government, that didn't happen. That has now subsequently happened, and we're now aware of the second tranche that we've received, but post-balance date, and certainly the work wasn't completed. So that's why it looks like we've substantially underspent. Well, in fact, we haven't. And you'll note that the year before we ended on 55 million. So what that's telling us is we invested 10 million across the period in property, plant and equipment. And the next note is probably a little bit more challenging to explain, but I'll do my best. And accountants tend to get too much into detail, so stop me if I am. We have a bank overdraft number there of 3.1 million against zero budget, but we have a budget of $18 million for debt. So there's two reasons for that, and you'll be aware of on one of the committee meetings that we chose to use overdraft facility rather than the long-term debt facility we're expecting to put in place by the end of the financial year. That was due to facilities that were made available to us. So that's the first reason that it's not showing as a longer-term debt. The second one is in that expectation around the second tranche from government, we were also expecting to borrow 2.5 million extra for that, and so that didn't occur. And there was a number of timing issues at the end of the year, and they weren't issues actually, they were just timing situations that occurred where funding was paid out post-balance date for the completion of the Stead Street project and for transfers of money to other parties. The debt position is at the end of September is on track with the LTP year one. So this is a little bit more complex to explain in that the plan made for that annual plan was made quite some time ago. Too confusing or okay with it? Any questions, Chair?
Just any questions on that? Yes, Stuart?
Just, there was a number I was waiting to talk about, but just when we are borrowing for capital, are we be able to very clearly state, well, we've probably got one project, Steve Street, this is the debt we've taken on, that we can, you know, even whether we need to show the public, because the public will be going, where's this debt, why are you borrowing? We can clearly show the connection to that project, because I know in some other councils, they're coming along and going, we don't know where our debt's, why we're in debt so much.
Yeah.
Where does it come from? And they can't, some of the councillors can't explain it.
No, so that's a requirement internally for us to keep a ledger effectively, because over time, that's exactly what does happen. You don't take the debt out specifically. Well, councils today don't tend to take the debt out specifically for a project. They manage their debt as a global bucket, and they move that money around depending on the advantages and disadvantages of changing it. So some of that transparency can become lost. And in this situation, forecasting forward for the LTP, we do have the Stead Street debt. But in saying that, it was part of the total climate resilience package, which we are bringing back to council as a net result.
I think in the future, like, because this is a discussion around the nation in regards to all these debt levels. I think it'd be critical for any councils to actually say, that was for in the future, this is why we're at. And also if there's a reduction or a payment that they can see that too. Because it gets all lost. This is the problem with this so-called ugly beast of, if I can call it that, and it gets all sort of blended in. It's very hard, especially with people, you know, we won't be here in 10 years' time probably, that they know what was going. It's just that transparency.
Yes.
And I think it'd be very critical in the future to have that. We can start that now because we don't have too much debt.
Yes.
So
there's an internal ledger and then
Internal reconciliation, yes.
reconciliation. And with the notes, because I know there's a number of pages of notes attached to these. I'm not too sure if it goes into detail in those.
I'm not sure about the need to or the ability to declare the debt, but I'm sure that we can work through that. But internally, coming back to committee meetings, we can ensure that we keep track of the various projects over time.
I don't know about the legalities, whether we need to, but I'm just saying, I think it'd be a very good idea to put it into it, just saying, well, this is how we're going to show the community where the funding that's going to go. So, all good. Okay.
Chair, page 95, the statement of cash flows. It reflects just exactly what we've been talking about, that the plan suggested that we would have been drawing down some debt, long-term debt, sorry, and that the plan showed that we would have been perhaps investing more in probably plant and equipment. So we ended the year with a financial overdraft, as I said, so the two numbers tie back together, so negative 3.1 million. If there was no questions on that.
Any questions on the cash flow? Just looking at it, so it's just, you can see the drawdown of the debt didn't happen of that 15, and the overall cash position there. Okay, thank you, Tanya.
Pages 96 through to 845. These are, you'll be aware, the parts of the accounts that are very important and most people don't read. Very technical as well. So I'm not planning to go through them unless there is a question. But you may be interested in, because it comes through into the summary statement. The report summary is note 24. Note 24 explains,
What page is that?
sorry, page 143,
Just give us a second to get there.
apologies.
Right, page, yep, 143, note 24.
So this, as I said, comes through to the annual report summary. So if anybody's going to read our financials, they tend to read the summary if it's available somewhere. In this note, we do our best to explain in plain English the difference between the result and the plan. And we explain the profit and loss statement or the comprehensive revenue and expenditure. And then on pages 144, we note the change in the balance sheet. So, and it is hard because we have very few lines to be able to explain it, as I've just gone through with you. So if there is any commentary on our explanation, we'd appreciate your feedback on that. This is, as I said, it's part of the public-facing piece that people might look at.
This is certainly looking at page 143. The numbers that jump out would be other expenses, which I think we can go to note F. So that's relating to. I'll just get you to tell us note F, Tanya, please.
Other expenses were over budget by 4.9 million. Across council, additional work was commissioned to enhance and align the business direction, increased contracted costs associated with Blue Cliff Steed Street Pump Station, both offset with other income. We could perhaps mention the opening of the lagoon and no. Just tying it back to just thinking as I read that, it's not tied back completely to the chairman's statement.
Yep.
Is there agreement on that?
Yep, no, that's fair. John?
Could they be split? Blue Cliffs and the Steed Street, the number, rather than combining them?
Actually, to be honest, as we're looking at this, yes, so by the time we get to the publishing, we could, yeah.
It's good to have this page here, sort of with the variance analysis, really, because that is what people are after in terms of actuals versus budget. That's 143, and the next page 2 on the balance sheet, page 144. It's nice to have that in sort of a short summary. Boris?
I noticed the increased leave accrual, that's increased on last year by what, 180k, is that? Is that something I assume you're actively managing and trying to keep under control?
Constantly. It is on the radar of our HR team all the time, working with people. Financially, though, it is likely to continue to increase because as the value of salary and wages increase, the value of the leave increases. So unless there's a substantial reduction in it, I don't want to get too far off track, but I have been asked many times by a councillor next to you about the leave. Yeah, we're looking at it, and last time we looked at it, we saw that the average leave per person had not increased in hours or weeks, but the dollar value had increased, the salaries had increased, and there were some more staff which also increased it. So it's a number that's likely to increase. We have budgeted a small amount this year for recognising that any CPI or change to salaries will actually change that number upwards.
Is there Mr. Chairman, is there a target, is that an actual number or a proportion that you try to keep within?
Our general manager is not here to answer that. I can only speak to that in that we're trying to keep our annual leave current within the year that, accrued leave rather than past leave.
Thank you, Tanya. It's good to be pointed at those 2 pages of summaries.
And Chair, then we have the last section on prudential reporting, page 146. lots of graphs. This comes from the Prudential Regulations 2014. So here we're reporting against Measure 1, rates affordability. So the black bars are telling us what our maximum rates increase, or our maximum total rates could have been if we'd chosen to reach that level, and then the green tells us what they were. The next page, page 147, so the first page shows it in dollars. The second one we're looking at here in percentage increase year on year. And we have some historic numbers here to put it in context. So the black lines are the LTP measure that we put in place, maximum. You'll remember that it was 5%. After the 20, it was to be 5 and 5. The annual plan for 2024, though, proposed 6.9, and that was debated in the last annual plan. We achieved 7.44, which is the technically correct outcome. The difference between those two was not that we overrated, but by the time between setting the rate and striking the rates, there were more properties, more subdivisions, and some of the properties had greater value. So that small amount extra, we're just declaring here has been the difference.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I was looking this the other night, and I was looking, and the 20 stands out quite 20%. But the reality is that we didn't actually use all that money. 20, like it was carryover. And I looked at this, I'd be interested to see, because there's always maybe carryovers. And so for me, it was the interest, what was the rate that we needed for that year? And then what was the rate for the next year? Because we flattened that 20 out into the next 5, basically. It was almost only, I think, about 10%, we carried 10% through. And then used it, albeit it all flattens out, but it actually gives a more realistic value of what we actually need that year.
You're correct, Councillor. We, year 2, the annual plan 2023 was subsidised by what wasn't used in the first year. Debt, page 148, debt affordability graph. So this has black bars on it, has no other bars, so that's suggesting that throughout that period we had no long-term debt or no long-term debt. Graph 3, page 149, talks about our balanced budget. So while through each of those years we have actually always budgeted to have a deficit, the reality is, as Council has alluded to, we've had a small surplus. And the definition of surplus here includes rates, investment income, dividends, and net. So what we're saying here is we've achieved a balanced budget throughout the 4 years, 5 years.
Jeremy?
Another question in that is, would that indicate that we're rating too much?
They are small, if I remember rightly. 1 year was 106,000.
I know, but it is one of those things that I suppose from a community, they'll look at this and go, oh, you're always taking too much, because there's always people out there that will be looking at this with fine-tooth comb.
I would consider prudent management.
Community might think it's
No.
prudent
If
to
there
not
was-
take your
if
money.
If there was significant cash surpluses, Councillor, that would be a reasonable observation, but our surpluses tend to be not cash, as we've talked about today.
John?
Yeah, I guess, probably need to make it clear that we've gone back and used some of those reserves in our long-term plan. So it's probably that's a one conversation rather than two separate, but I suppose it's probably a way of being clear on our communication.
That's true.
Not a very technical analogy, Chair, but I've always suggested that what is not used drops to the bottom and carries forward into next year. Nothing's wasted. It's a matter of timing. And sometimes we get the timing right and sometimes we can't. But given we're turning over 50 million, I think the surpluses at the end are quite small, generally.
Yeah. Yes.
The next page, 150, debt control benchmark. It's all green because we don't have any long-term debt. So that's reflecting actually our net assets at the balance date. And graph 7 is again operational control, suggesting that our net cash flows were positive, although tiny. And that's the end of the prudential debt benchmarks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tony.
And page 152 is our draft audit opinion.
We have the auditors here for the public excluded part of the session. Just those. We'll come back in.
Then I wasn't going to go through the annual report summary, but the same information goes through.
Exactly. That's fine. Forrest, do you have something you'd like to ask?
Yes, on the graph on page about external public debt, it says there's no external public debt, but we just see there's no long-term debt. We do have temporary debts from time to time, don't we? Overdraft, that's what I mean.
I think the definition here, I've noted that myself, councillor, to emphasise that it was no long-term debt at that point. Throughout each of those years, we actually have ended the year mostly bar one, I think, with some degree of overdraft. But that hasn't qualified to reach these graphs.
So I'm just asking, is that the right term?
I can check that. I'll check that with the
Long-term debt.
people at the back of the room.
Thank you. All right, so that brings us to the end. So I'm just going back to the start of our paper. We have a look at the recommendation to the committee. So on page 14, we have 6 recommendations to resolve. So we've been going through both the annual report and the summary. The summary pages were included, just to make sure everyone's on the same page with that. So the provision of any additional information and requesting any changes. So noting the pen has been busy. Some of them I think we've been more direct on, and others have sort of we'll let you take wind of. And I guess everyone here will see it back on the 23rd anyway. So they'll have to see what's changed or hasn't. So we'll leave that in your hands. Great, Boris.
I wonder if the wording of item 6, or whether, I'm not sure whether it's covered elsewhere, but because this might be covered by 4, but recommend to council for adoption. I was going to say subject to, oh no, that's all right. I'm just wondering how we get the changes that we recommended today into this. Is that, do they?
Is that under,
4, 5
I'll
and
just ask
6.
Rachel, is that 4, 5, yeah, 4, 5 and 6 sort of covers?
The intention was that 5, that you request any changes, and you've given us direction as we've gone through the document, that then flows through into what you were then recommending be adopted on the 23rd.
Right.
You could amend it to say recommend and updated to a 2324 annual report. If you wish to say that.
I think we had the same discussion last year actually, or some other time.
I think yeah, certainly importantly, the team in front of us had their pens busy and scribing away. So there's the expectations that we will see it back on the 23rd. And these words are pretty direct, I'd say.
So or are we adding the updated to it, or not necessary?
To be honest, I think we know what it means. Yeah, to be honest. Yep. Nicole?
Yes, no, just reading through these recommendations, I think they flow through. I'm reasonably comfortable with working out with it.
Thank you. All right, so we will.
I'm happy to move.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll move them all.
Yep.
They're all pretty 1 to 6.
Great, Jeremy, thank you very much.
Second.
Second, yep. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much to Rachel, Dave, and Tanya, and the team behind you for all your hard work. Yes, appreciate it. So we will be moving to public excluded shortly. I'm just going to check my agenda. We're still in public. Just to say, item number 10, there is no extraordinary business today. We'll now move to read the public excluded portion.
The reason for moving public excluded is to cover the confirmation of the public excluded minutes of the previous meeting, 11 September. Then also to 11.1, cover the governance level risk management overview and the audit management report at 11.2. And the reasons for it would be to prevent disclosure to all use of official information for improper gain or advantage. 11.2 will be to enable any local authority holding the information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantageous commercial activities. And then 11.2 would be to carry on without prejudice or disadvantageous negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations.
Great, thank you. Someone,
Having heard the reasons, I'm happy to move into public excluded, Mr. Chairman.
you know, and second. All right, Jeremy, thank you. In favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Just wait. Acknowledgement. It is off. Great. We are